is Tech Sergeant Christopher O'Donnell, and I'll be giving you your local and transient military aircraft familiarization for McGhee Tyson International Guard Base. Alright, today's topics. We'll talk about locally assigned aircraft, our own KC-135s, some specific specifications of that aircraft, and then the U.S. Air Force standard for egress procedures for the 135. We'll roll into transient military aircraft. This is just going to be a broad overview about what we have coming in and out of here on a day-to-day basis. Some types of those aircraft, general specifications, and general hazards. And then for special considerations, we will talk about aircraft parking, and then some specifics for munitions and some special hazards that go on there. Alright, locally assigned aircraft. Alright, here we have 10 KC-135R model straddle tankers. They're permanently assigned to the 134th Air Refueling Wing. Primarily our mission here is air refueling, but we do have secondary passenger movement, cargo movement, and aeromedical capabilities. Locations vary between the upper, middle, and lower ramps depending upon what's going on with those aircraft on a given time. Here are some specific specifications for the 135. I apologize for the eye chart there. It's just what we have to, just to put all the information in one chart here. Again, about 136 feet long, 130-foot wingspan. We have 4 engines, 4 CFM International, CFM 56's military designation F108. They each produce about 22,000 pounds of thrust, so 88,000 pounds of thrust approximately across the board there. Max fuel load approximately 200,000 pounds, give or take, and then our max cargo capacity, as you can see on the bottom, is 80,000 pounds. Now that varies with fuel load, so we cannot carry a max fuel and a max cargo load. What that means for us is that for every pound of cargo we can carry 1 less pound of fuel and vice versa. Now, if we are carrying palletized cargo, we have a special system on board that allows us to carry 6 463L pallets, but those are limited to 6,000 pounds apiece. So in that case, our cargo capacity is limited to 36,000 pounds. As far as personnel goes, we are limited to 57 souls on board, but that can vary and be dramatically lowered depending upon what mission set we are doing. For cargo, we can carry fewer passengers because of space inside the cargo compartment. And for aeromedical, we can carry fewer people because of egress capacity. Alright, some general hazards that are on board the aircraft here. Directly behind me, you can see the engine and APU danger areas at ground idle, and then at TRT, so takeoff rated thrust. You can see there the cone gets a lot bigger on the front, and the arc gets a lot bigger, or the arc gets a lot bigger on the front, and the cone gets a lot bigger on the back as those thrust levels increase. Here at TRT, at 160 feet, winds are going to be approximately 145 miles an hour, and the temperature coming out of there is going to be 60 degrees C. That's very, very hot, 110, 120 degrees. And then here on the left, you can see at idle thrust at 25 feet, it's going to be 145 knots and 60 degrees C. So again, you see that dramatic swing when it comes to thrust output. And then here on the side, you have the APU itself. That vents above the ground level, so it should not be a hazard to firefighters. But if you do have apparatus that are approaching from the rear of the aircraft, that could be a hazard if it is running. Alright, hearing protection. We all want to be able to hear. We don't want to have tinnitus in our old age. We don't want to go crazy. So these are the noise levels for what it is at TRT and at engine idle. So prolonged exposure within a foot of the engine at idle, or 30 foot at TRT, if you have prolonged exposure greater than an hour without hearing protection, maybe even with hearing protection, you could get permanent damage to your ears. And then as you go outward from there, at 60 foot at idle and 150 foot at TRT, you have your area where the Air Force says you have to wear hearing protection. I know for firemen this is difficult because of the way we have to wear our SCBAs. Hearing protection can interfere with some of that, but if you do have the capability to put a set of earplugs in or to put a set of low profile earmuffs on prior to making entry, I highly recommend you do that. Alright, fuel. Again, primary mission is air refueling, so we carry a lot of gas. We have 4 main fuel tanks, 1 above each engine, and we have reserve tanks that are above each wing, outboard of number 1 and number 4 in the wingtips. Then across the bottom we have we have 3 fuel tanks, 4 forward body, center wing, and aft body, and then up in the tail, that brown block there is a spherical tank that's behind the aft pressure bulkhead, and that's our upper deck tank. Just by amounts here, your average car carries 15 gallons of gas, maybe 20, depending, or 25, depending on if you're driving a big truck or a big SUV. We carry, just in our forward body, just this purple area right here, 5,800 gallons of fuel. So just think about how long your car could run off of that. And then center wing tank and aft body, 60 or 7,300 gallons and 6,300 gallons respectively. Again, if we have an issue where one of these tanks gets punctured or the skin becomes ruptured on landing, or it has to do a belly up landing, just keep that in your mind, keep that in your cross check when you're doing scene size up. Keep looking for those signs of a fuel spill, because you don't want to have your fireman making entry, walking through a puddle of JP8 or a puddle of Jet A and having an ignition risk there, and if it does become ignited, having them trapped on the other side of that, or even worse, within it. Alright, now this is the 135 standard according to the Air Force. This is predicated upon an aircraft landing with all three gear down and locked, being upright, pointed into the wind, and for the aircraft to be intact. Now, we've all seen the pictures of most aircraft incidents. Aircraft are not intact when they land. They do not land with all three gear down and locked. They typically do not land without some kind of structural damage, and they almost never land pointed directly into the wind to where you can set up this direction. However, this is what the Air Force standard says, and in an ideal world with an ideal set of circumstances, this is what it will look like. So, first in apparatus, cuts a path on the rescue side. Now, according to the Air Force, this is the left side of the aircraft. We'll cut a path to the wing. The second in apparatus will establish RIT, your Rapid Intervention Team, and then ensure a secondary means of egress for the entry team. So they want to cut another path off that primary ingress in order that if something happens, that primary ingress gets cut off, that the responding crews actually have the opportunity to egress the scene safely. Now the rescue team, a three-man rescue team, will then ladder that wing and open the overwing hatch. Overwing hatch has a D10 on the outside. You press it, a handle pops out, quarter turn, door falls in, and you can access the aircraft that way. When you're wearing your fire gloves, this can be difficult because of the way that D10 is with paint and everything else that's on top of it. So most of us carry a little rubber door chock that's been shaved down to a point, and you can just punch that in there and the handle will come out that way. All right, once the three-man rescue team opens that door, they will enter with a charged handline. You will not enter this aircraft without a charged handline. The aircraft is a structure. Once you're inside the interior of the aircraft, firefighting is just the same as it is on a house, on a car, anything else like that. Firefighting is interior, so it's just a standard interior fire. All right, one member goes to the boom pod for primary search. They will also look at the APU and shut that down if it's still running. One member will proceed forward to the cockpit or the latrine, and then the cockpit for aircraft shutdown and primary search. And then the member with the handline will go directly to the seat of the fire and proceed with suppression. Anybody else you have extra will either get paired up with the attack line, or will perform ventilation and primary, secondary search, that sort of thing. Again, your own local protocols will dictate how you act on an aircraft fire scene, but again, this is the Air Force standard. This is what they want to see. All right, here's some photos to show you what it looks like for us. See their aircraft being laddered, and then them making entry through that leftover wing hatch. Again, footing the ladder, making sure that you have sure footing. The wings are sloped backwards. Once you get up on top, they're not flat on top, and they can be very, very slick depending upon weather conditions. And as we all know, we spray water and foam everywhere. Again, they can be slick, so be mindful of that and make sure you have your footing. All right, put these two pictures on here to illustrate one good, one bad thing. So the guys there with the red SCBA covers, they're standing directly in front of the engine. Probably not a good idea, especially if that engine's still running. We don't want to get sucked into it and cause the engine just shell out. Not a good thing if you're standing right next to it. And then the guys on the right, they're doing the right thing. They are proceeding aft toward the APU for suspected APU fire. Guy in the back's talking on the radio. One note on radio communications when you're inside, it's a giant metal tube. Radio frequencies traditionally do not react well with giant metal tubes. So you may have communication issues from once you are within the aircraft itself, depending upon where command is set up. That said, you can relay. You can put somebody at the door to relay radio communications out to the aircraft, out to the on-scene commander, or you could just walk to the nearest hatch, open it up if ventilation permits, and transmit that way. All right, so again, Air Force standard here: throttles, bottles, and batteries. So your throttles, all four throttle quadrants in the center of the aircraft, or center of the console there. Retard all four to the rear. You'll feel them hit a detent up and over that, and then all the way down to cutoff, and that'll cut off fuel, ignition, everything else to all four motors. And you have the bottles up in the center console there. Those are your fire bottles. There are 2 per wing per side. They cannot be crossed over from left to right or vice versa. So if once you expend those 2 bottles, that's it. You have nothing else left to give. Now the pilots may have already chosen to do this prior to egress. Again, if you see those handles pulled for engine shutdown, if you do have an engine failure or fire, they may have already expended those bottles. So be mindful of that too. Don't just keep sitting there hitting that button and expecting something to happen. A note on the fire suppression system. Those bottles go directly into the engine itself. They will not extinguish a core fire. If the interior, that center core of that engine is on fire, those bottles will not do anything for you. The only way to extinguish that fire is to flood it with water and foam. That's the only way to extinguish a core fire on our aircraft. And then you have the battery switch, step 3. Now it's a 3-position switch, EMER off and norm. Make sure it is in EMER, make sure it's in off, that center detent position. All right, now here's the APU and main battery compartment in the latrine. You can see it's directly after the cockpit. They have quarter turn disconnects that are on each the APU and the main battery. Turn those quarter turn, they pop right off, fall off. Make sure they're pulled away from the terminal so that they can't flop back and get contact, and the aircraft will be completely killed with electrical power. All right, now again, that was the Air Force standard for 135 egress. That does not encompass anything that you may or may not see on a fire ground. All right, transient aircraft. This is just a broad overview of some military aircraft we have coming in and out of here. Aircraft, T-1A Jayhawk, you got T-6A Texan II, the Talon and the Goshawk down there at the bottom. You see less than the other 2, but you still have the capability to see them on and off the aircraft, on and off the airfield, correction. All right, now fighter and attack aircraft, primary hazards with these are forward-firing munitions and cannons. Again, be mindful of this. I say forward-firing, the AC-130 on the side there has side-firing munitions, and as you can see by that picture, a lot of chaff and flares. So when you are working around these aircraft, never assume that it is safe regardless of where you're standing. Approach everything at a 90-degree or 45-degree angle. Be mindful of where these things are pointed and what the pilots up front, if they are conscious, what they are doing. All right, fighter and attack aircraft, you got the F-16s that come in and out of here from time to time, and then you have the Hornets and Super Hornets, the 2 Navy variants that come in and out of here relatively frequently. And then you have across the bottom what's supposed to be replacing all those aircraft. You have the F-35, the F-35B, and the F-35C. The A model is the Air Force model, standard, basically an F-16 with a stealth coating. Then you have the B model, which is the vertical takeoff and landing. It's a replacement for the Harrier that the Navy and the Marine Corps are buying. And then you have the C model there with the larger wings, wingtips fold for carrier storage, and it carries more gas internally. So that's the Navy version of that. May or may not see them out here. We don't really know. We're buying them now, but as far as actual combat deployments, we're not really sure what's going on with that. All right, cargo and tanker aircraft. Again, just like us, all these carry a lot of gas. They can carry a lot of people, and they can carry a lot of cargo. So be mindful of that. You got the Greyhound, that's the Navy COD, carrier onboard delivery. That's their primary means of moving personnel and cargo on and off a carrier. And you have C-17 and C-5. Those are primary cargo, long-haul, oversized cargo capacity aircraft. Then you have the KC-10 extender, the Air Force's other air refueler. That's what it's basically us but bigger. Carries a lot more gas than we do. And then you have the Marine Corps tanker there, the KC-130J super tanker, and then the standard Hercules. It's a four-engine prop cargo and passenger movement aircraft. All right, special mission aircraft. Again, these are very similar to what you're going to see across the way, what you guys see day to day, coming in and out of TAC Air, coming in and out of the aircraft terminal. Basically, they are civilian airliners that have been modified with countermeasure and communication systems to allow for survivability of worldwide comms. And they take DVs, general officers, cabinet level officials all over the place wherever they need to go. Caveat to that, in the bottom corner there, the VC-25A Air Force One, it's a 747 on paper. However, it has been heavily modified. If you do have an incident with one of this, expect for there to be a whole lot more going on, especially if POTUS is on board, than just the standard egress of an aircraft. All right, other special mission aircraft that we have. Primary threats and hazards with these are countermeasures, if they have them, and another primary threat is radiological hazards. So RF radiation, radio frequency radiation. All these aircraft put off a massive amount of communications and radar energy. You want to make sure those are shut down prior to coming on. I don't know about you, but I like having kids. I like having my organs arranged exactly the way they are, and I don't want to be cooked. The E2C and the E3G up there, those are primary airborne early warning control aircraft that we have. The E4B Night Watch, that's the doomsday bird, the one that goes up and flies around in case of nuclear war. You have the Mercury there, that's a Navy communications aircraft they use to communicate with their submarines. And then the Joint Stars and the Compass Call both have various and sundry ELINT missions, electronic intelligence missions. All right, some other recce platforms and special mission platforms. You have the RC-135, the gray and white aircraft there. That's Air Force ELINT, communications intelligence aircraft. And then you have the P-8A Poseidon. It's basically 737 with a bomb bay. It's a pretty cool aircraft. But the Navy comes up and flies these and does touch and goes in and out of the airfield relatively frequently. All right, so helicopters, whirlybirds, giant spinning tools of death. The Blackhawks, the Army Aviation Group just up the road from us has the Blackhawks. The CH-53Es, the Marine Corps flies those in and out of here on an infrequent basis, but you have seen them, you probably will see them again. The Ospreys, of course. And then you have the Cobras and the Apaches, the two different kinds of attack helicopters that the Army, Marine Corps, and the Navy have. Be mindful of those again, forward firing munitions. Special caveat to these, the gunner's helmet is slave to the chin turret. So if he's looking at you and he doesn't have that thing off or locked, that gun will follow you. So don't be completely weirded out by that. And then you have Omega Air, the KC-707. That's a private military contractor that does air refueling work for the Navy and Marine Corps. All right, special considerations. Don't end up like him. All right, this is, if you've ever wondered what the colored bands on the size of munitions mean, this is what they mean. Yellow is your high explosive, brown's your low explosive. Basically just magnitude of detonation is what you're looking at there. Gray is your chemical. Please, dear God, if you see that, go in the other direction and let somebody know. AP or heat. Heat stands for high explosive anti-tank rounds. They're armor depleting. Your depleted uranium rounds that the A-10 uses, those sort of things. They'll have a black ring around them. Countermeasures will be silver. Smoke, which you shouldn't see on an aircraft, but you will see on various ground combat vehicles, be a light green. And then incendiary, things that set stuff on fire, will be light red. Illuminating rounds, white phosphorus, that sort of thing. Again, it's self-oxidizing once it's in atmosphere. Be careful with that. Those are white. Practice rounds will be light blue. You'll see that on some of these aircraft coming in and out of here if they're going to the ranges. And then your drill rounds, so drill and ceremony rounds that are in a gun for blank purposes will be blue, dark blue bands. Dark violet, you shouldn't see, experimental. Nuclear, I pray to God never to see that here. Light orange. Evaluation rounds are a darker orange, and then guided missiles, just the guidance package on the front is your pink. All right, so I know this is kind of an odd arrangement of chart here, but this is just a vast summary of what we can carry, just to get it in your head about what some of this stuff might look like. This is not a comprehensive list by any stretch of the imagination, but it has some of the more common types that you may or may not see. All right, now parking locations. Again, like I said in the intro, we have 3 different ramps that we can park our aircraft on, the upper, middle, and lower ramps. Primary ramp will be the lower ramp, but depending upon what mission sets we have and what's going on maintenance-wise with the aircraft, they may be sitting on the middle ramp or the upper ramp. And you can see them taxied up and down Golf Taxiway the entire time there. So if we, for some reason, we do have to bring you onto our side of the airfield for an emergency or training or something like that, you'll be provided an escort, and we will escort you either the fire department, ops, or the security forces shop. More than likely, the security forces shop. We'll be escorting you to the either the training site or the hazard scene. Well, that's all I've got. Any questions?